Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad. He destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light. He's not a spirit. He has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, The Straight Path, As-Siratul Mustaqim, written by the great scholar of our times, the Shaykh, the Allama Abdullah al-Harari. May Allah have mercy on him. Now, this is a little bit awkward because for me here in Baltimore, Maghrib basically just came in and I haven't had a chance to pray yet. So, but I didn't want to wait all this time and make it sort of like doubtful if class was happening, especially since we haven't had class in a few weeks. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to just take like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, inshallah, to run and make salat real fast. And then I'll be back, inshallah ta'ala. All right, please bear with me. I appreciate your patience.
It's 50.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. All right. So again, we're picking up where we left off in the book, The Straight Path, insha'Allah ta'ala. And we were on page 137. We were in the middle of a long quotation in which the Hafiz Az-Zabidi, he quotes a long statement from Imam al-Qushayri, a statement dealing with how we should understand the attributes of Allah that are mentioned in our religious texts, the Quran and the sound hadith. And the part that we read last time, he basically said, kind of in summary, that it doesn't make any sense for a person to say that these attributes of Allah, such as istiwa or wajh, for example, it doesn't make any sense for someone to claim that it's not possible for us to know the meaning of these attributes. Okay, this whole conversation is in the context of what? It's in the context of the ayah in Surah Ali Imran, in which Allah informs us that the Quran has two types of ayahs. Okay, it has one type of ayah which is muhkama, meaning that its meaning is clear. And there's another type of ayah called mutashabiha, which means that it's not entirely clear what the meaning is supposed to be. Okay, and the people who are astray, the deviant people, the likeners, what do they say? They say you need to take these attributes literally. They say take them according to the apparent meaning, which means the literal meaning. Okay, and then they say, but you can't know what the actual meaning of the word is. They say you have to take it literally, but it's not possible to know the meaning. Okay, they say this because what they're really trying to say is, sometimes nowadays they use the expression, you take it literally, and they say the kayf is not known, the how is not known, which is not what the Salaf used to say. The Salaf, the Muslim scholars of the first 300 years, they used to say that Allah has no kayf. They did not say he has a kayf, but we don't know it. They said he has no kayf, which is what's correct. But the people running around nowadays, they change it a little bit to try to fool you. They say Allah has a kayf, but we don't know it. Okay, and this is, they say these things because they're trying to confuse the person. And the last part that we read from this statement of Imam al-Qushayri, he pointed out that these things that they say, they don't make any sense. Because if you say that a person can't know the meaning of these attributes, then that has several implications that the Muslim will never accept. Number one, it implies that the Prophet did not know what Allah revealed to him. Okay, it implies that the Prophet himself did not know the meaning of these attributes. Okay, so no Muslim will accept that the Prophet Muhammad himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did not even understand what had been revealed to him by Allah. Furthermore, the second implication is that not only did the Prophet ﷺ not understand it, but it implies that he was calling people to something that cannot be known, okay, which is ridiculous. The third implication then is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lied when he said that the Quran is in the clear Arabic tongue. Because if the Quran contains things that it's impossible for a human to understand, then that means it's not clear. If there are things that it's impossible for the meaning of it to be known, then that means the humans will not know the meaning of those things, which means it won't be clear, which means then that Allah lied when he said it's clear. You see? And then there was a fourth implication as well in the part that we read last class, which is that Allah himself cannot be known. Okay, because if you cannot know the attribute of a thing, then that means you cannot know that thing itself. Okay, which then itself implies then that Allah cannot be worshipped. Okay, so this thing that they're saying, like a lot of people, they don't see the danger of it right away. When they say, they say, take the apparent meaning, and the meaning is not known. Okay, they don't see the danger of it because it ultimately leads to saying that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was ignorant, and that he was inviting people, calling people to something that cannot be known, and that Allah is a liar, and that Allah Himself cannot be known, and that Allah Himself therefore cannot be worshipped. It leads to all of that stuff. Never mind the fundamental contradiction in saying you have to take the apparent meaning and then saying it has no meaning. Okay, it's like, make up your mind. Does it have no meaning or does it have an apparent meaning? It's like they're contradicting themselves when they say these things. Okay, I'm telling you, these likeners, these Wahhabis, like if you really listen to them and think for a few seconds about what they're saying, you realize they're contradicting themselves left and right. Left and right. They don't make any sense, really. At any rate, that's a brief summary of what we covered in our last class. And so now we're going to pick up where we left off, which is page 137 in the book. At the very bottom, that last paragraph, those last 3 lines at the bottom of the page 137. Here, Imam al-Qushayri continues. Okay, Imam al-Zabidi continues his long quotation from Imam al-Qushayri. So we're still in the middle of what he quoted. Here, Imam al-Qushayri, he says, and I wish I knew the one who denies ta'wil, does he apply this denial to everything and to every verse, or is he content with only abandoning ta'wil in the attributes of Allah the Exalted? So before we go into explaining what these sentences mean, let's remind everyone what the word ta'wil means. Okay? In the Arabic language, every word has what we call an apparent meaning, like a literal meaning. Okay, 1 second. In the Arabic language, every word has a meaning, which we call the literal meaning or the apparent meaning. Okay? If you take the word according to the apparent meaning, then you're taking it literally. If you reject the apparent meaning, then you're making ta'wil. So the definition of ta'wil then is to take a word like not on its apparent meaning. This is what ta'wil is. And these likeners, these Wahhabis, what do they say? They say it's forbidden to make ta'wil. Some of them say forbidden in the whole Quran. Some of them say it's forbidden only when dealing with Allah's attributes. But regardless of which one they're saying, it's misguidance. And Imam al-Qushayri here is going to address that. He says, and I wish I knew the one who denies ta'wil, does he apply this denial to everything and to every verse? Or is he content with only abandoning ta'wil in the attributes of Allah the Exalted? Okay, so what he's saying here is, when they say you cannot make ta'wil, are they only saying that about the attributes of Allah? Or are they saying that about everything in the Quran? Because the mutashabihat ayahs, the ones that are whose meaning is not 100% clear, those ayahs not only include ayahs that deal with the attributes of Allah, but they include ayahs that deal with legal rulings of the sacred law. Some of those ayahs are also mutashabihat. So do these people claim then that even for those ayahs you can't make ta'wil? Let's see what Imam al-Qushayri says. He says, if he refrains from ta'wil fundamentally, meaning if he considers ta'wil to be inappropriate in every case, regardless of the subject of the ayah, what does Imam al-Qushayri say? He says he has dismantled the religious law and the different branches of knowledge, since there is practically no verse or hadith except that it is in need of some level of explanation and maneuvering in speech. There are things that there is no escape from ta'wil for them. Okay, so what Imam al-Qushayri is saying is that if these people claim that ta'wil is forbidden as like in a blanket way, no matter what, then this person is just like playing with our deen. There are things in the Quran which obviously cannot be taken literally. For example, there's an ayah describing a punishment that Allah sent upon one of the earlier nations. It says, "Tudammiru kulla shay'in bi amri rabbiha." It says about the wind that was sent to destroy them. It says it destroyed everything by the command of its Lord. It says the wind did what? Destroyed everything. If you take this ayah literally, it would mean that the entire earth was destroyed, the heavens were destroyed, the paradise was destroyed, the hellfire was destroyed, the arsh was destroyed, Allah himself was destroyed. Okay, it would mean all of that if you take it literally. So if a person claims that ta'wil is blanketly forbidden, that you can never do it, then they're saying that Allah was destroyed and the hellfire and the paradise are destroyed and so on and so forth. Okay, it's like they're turning our religion into some kind of just silly caricature. So we cannot accept, and they cannot accept, to say that ta'wil is blanketly forbidden. He continues. He says there's no difference among the sane people about that, meaning sane people do not disagree that ta'wil is called for in certain ayahs, that there are certain ayahs of the Quran where there's no escape from making ta'wil. He says the sane people do not disagree about that. So he's implying, therefore, that these people who say you can't make ta'wil, he's implying that they're insane because what they're saying makes so little sense. He says there's no difference among the sane people about that, except the irreligious whose intent is to dismantle the religious laws. He says the only people who disagree that ta'wil, that there's no escape from ta'wil in certain ayahs, are those who are irreligious, meaning they're not religious people, and their actual goal is to dismantle this deen of ours. Furthermore, he says, the creed of denying ta'wil leads to the opponent invalidating what he claims to be adhering to of the religion. Okay, what does that mean? It means that on the one hand, this person, he claims to be adhering to the Sharia. He claims to be, a follower of the religious law. But by making a blanket prohibition against ta'wil, he invalidated the religious law. So therefore, how can he, on the one hand, claim to be following it while at the same time invalidating it? Okay, because the religious laws also call for ta'wil. Imam al-Qushayri continues. He says, if, on the other hand, he said, ta'wil is permissible in general, excluding what is in reference to Allah and his attributes, for there is no ta'wil in that. Okay, if he goes the other route, if he admits that ta'wil is permissible in general, but you just can't do it when it comes to Allah and his attributes, then what is he saying? He says this is an implication from him that what pertains to other than Allah, the exalted, should be known, and what pertains to the maker and his attributes should be avoided. This is something that no Muslim accepts. So if they claim that ta'wil is permissible in general, but it's not permissible in the attributes of Allah, then what he's actually saying, what he's implying here, is that everything other than Allah is something that should be known. And the one thing that must not be known is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attributes. This is something a Muslim will not accept. Why? Because it says clearly in the Quran that Allah created us to worship him. Okay? And worship is not valid unless you know the one you're worshiping. Okay, you can't worship a thing if you don't even know what it is you're worshiping. That worship is not valid. Okay, so our fundamental purpose in this life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which requires that we know him. It requires that we know Allah. So actually, out of everything that exists, the one thing that has the greatest right to be known is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attributes. But these people, by saying ta'wil is permitted in general, but the one area where it's not permitted is Allah and his attributes, they're saying in those areas, there's no meaning to these words. These things cannot be known. If they say these kinds of things, then what they're really saying is that Allah cannot be worshipped and that Allah doesn't even deserve to be worshipped. But rather, it's the creations that deserve to be known, but the Creator does not. This is why Imam al-Qushayri says this is something that no Muslim accepts. Okay, no Muslim would accept for someone to say that the creation should be known and the Creator should not. Okay, that is just like the greatest extent of backwardsness. Then he continues. He says, the secret of the issue is that those who refrain from ta'wil actually believe in likening Allah to the creation. However, they use trickery. So Al-Qushayri, he lays it plain right here. He lays it perfectly plain. These people who say that you cannot make ta'wil, the reality of things is that, like, the truth of the matter is that they believe Allah is similar to the creation, but they're not just going to come out and say it because they know that the Muslims in general adhere to the ayah, laysa kamithlihi shay. They know, Muslims know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no similarity to the creation, that you cannot liken Allah to the creation. So they won't just come out and say Allah is like, a human, or Allah is like a computer, or whatever they might say Allah is like. They won't come out and say it like that. They dance around the issue without using the word like or similar. Okay? But what do they do instead? They say, oh, this word wajh or this word yad, they say you have to take it literally. And of course, the literal meaning of these things are body parts. Okay? They say you have to take it literally. But then if you call them on it and say, oh, but these things are body parts, that would mean Allah has a similarity between himself and the creation. Then the likener, he will say, oh, but without a similarity though. We say you got to take it literally, but without similarity, which again doesn't make any sense, because the literal meaning of wajh is a face, like an actual body part. And so if you take it literally, you are necessarily saying Allah has a similarity to the creation, because many of the bodies of creation have faces, including humans and animals. Okay, so if you take it literally, you're saying Allah is similar to the creation. And if you say without similarity to the creation, then you're actually rejecting the literal meaning. So again, they're contradicting themselves. They're contradicting themselves. Okay? But the point, the reason why they're saying it, they say all of this, but without similarity, they add that stuff there to try to confuse you. But the real goal is to get you to accept the first half, to get you to accept a literal meaning of these words. This is what he's saying here. What's the trickery? He says, they say, he has a hand not like the hands, and a foot unlike the feet, and an istiwa of the self that is not like what we conceive among ourselves. So let the precise one say, this is suspicious talk. It needs clarity. You're saying we take the issue by the apparent meaning and we cannot conceive its meaning is a contradiction. Okay, out of one side of their mouth, they're saying you must take it according to the apparent meaning, the literal meaning. And out the other side of their mouth, they're saying, oh, a man cannot know the meanings of these things. He's contradicting himself. Okay, on the one hand, he's saying, take this meaning, a meaning which is known to us, the literal meaning. And on the other side of his mouth, he's saying a human can't know it. So he's contradicting himself. What does Imam al-Qushayri say here? He says, if you take the apparent meaning, then the apparent meaning of the saq, in the saying of the exalted, Yawma yukshafu an saq, which means the day when the saq will be exposed, is the organ composed of skin, muscle, bone, nerves, and marrow. This ayah, which is in Surah Al-Qalam, Yawma yukshafu an saq, it means, on the day in which a great difficulty will occur. Okay, the phrase, like the word saq, it doesn't actually mean shin. Okay, this is an Arab expression. When they say yukshafu an saq, it means a great hardship is going to occur, a great difficulty. That's how it should be understood. But of course, the likeners, they point to this ayah to say this means that Allah has a shin, like a lower part of the leg, okay, which is the literal meaning of saq. The literal meaning of it, as it says here, is an organ composed of skin, muscle, bone, nerves, and marrow. The shin of your leg, the part that's between your knee and your ankle, all right, the front of it, the front of that lower leg is called a shin. And of course, the likeners, they claim that this ayah means Allah has a shin, which is madness. Imam al-Qushayri continues. He says, so if you accepted this apparent meaning and you adhered to confirming these organs, then this is blasphemy. Imam al-Qushayri lays it out plain. He says, if you accept that Allah is attributed with body parts, skin, flesh, bones, that's kufr. That's saying Allah is clearly similar to the creation. And even if you deny that it's flesh and bone, in the end, if it's a body, meaning it's something that has size, it has shape, it has dimensions, length, width, depth. If you're saying Allah is attributed with such a thing, then you are saying that Allah is similar to the creations. This is why it's blasphemy. Okay, if it were valid for something that has a form and a shape and a size and a volume to be worshipped, then it would be valid to worship idols. Those Arabs back in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, didn't they fashion things out of, wood or iron or dates or whatever they were making it out of? Didn't they fashion things and then worship it? They made bodies with body parts, including little shins. Didn't they do that? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So if it were valid to worship something you don't see, but it supposedly has body parts, then it would mean it would be theoretically valid to worship something you do see that has body parts. But the truth of the matter is, if something has body parts, it's necessarily created. And the one that's created is not worthy of worship. The one that's worthy of worship is the creator, the one who brought those created things into existence. And the creator has no similarity to any created thing. This is because the creator is eternal. There's no beginning to his existence. And his attributes are eternal. There's no beginning to his attributes. Meanwhile, the created things all are created. They have beginnings and their attributes have beginnings. So there's never going to be an attribute in common. Furthermore, because Allah and his attributes existed before anything else existed, they existed when there was nothing existing other than Allah. This means that Allah and his attributes do not require space because they existed when there was no space. Okay, so if Allah were attributed with an actual body part, something with size and shape, well, that body part requires space because bodies have volume. They take up a certain amount of space. And if there's not space, then you cannot have a body. So it's very obvious to the thinking person. It's very obvious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, therefore, is not a body because he existed when space and time did not exist. But these likeners, they want you to believe that Allah has a literal face, meaning a body part, literal hands, meaning a body part, literal eyes, meaning a body part, literal feet, meaning a body part, a literal shin, meaning a body part. And they want you to believe he's in a literal place, which is something that only bodies do, is occupy spaces. They want you to believe that Allah literally goes up and down. And again, movement is something that only bodies do. Okay, they are unable to conceive of Allah except as a body. Okay, which means ultimately that they conceive of Allah as being an idol. Except instead of being some statue on the earth, they think he's some kind of giant idol way up above the seventh sky that goes up and down. Subhanallah. Let's finish what Imam al-Qushayri is saying. He says, if you accept this apparent meaning, that the shin means body part and that Allah is attributed with it, he says, if you accept this apparent meaning and you adhere to confirming these organs, then this is blasphemy. It means you're not even a Muslim if you believe that. He says, and if you are unable to take by them, meaning if you refuse to say the meaning of saq is that it's a body part, he says, then what happened to taking by the apparent meaning? Like if you refuse to say Allah is attributed with body parts, then what that means is you just abandon your own rule that you need to take everything literally, that you have to take the apparent meaning. You see, this is how you back them into a corner. They say you have to take it literally. And then you say, but the literal meaning is a body part. Do you say Allah is a body with body parts? They're going to say no. They're going to say no, which means, therefore, that they're not even following their own rule, that their rule is that you have to take everything literally, and they're not actually taking it, well, we hope they're not actually taking it literally. But the words that they're saying seem to suggest that they are taking it literally, that they actually believe Allah is a body. And I seek refuge in Allah from such a blasphemous belief. He says about this person who refuses to say that saq means a body part, he says, did you not then abandon the apparent meanings and know about the exaltedness of the Holy Lord from that to which the apparent meanings delude? Exalted is he. He's saying for the person who says you have to take everything literally, but then he rejects the literal meaning, you say to him, well, what happened to your rule that you got to take everything literally? Is it not the case that the reason why you refused to say saq means a body part is because you actually know that Allah is clear of such a thing? That's why you refuse to say that it's that the saq means body part. You know Allah is clear of such a thing. And so what that means is you're not actually taking the apparent meaning. You've contradicted yourself. He continues. He says, and if the opponent says, these apparent meanings are meaningless in themselves, this is what they will do eventually. Like if you push this button hard enough, they'll resort to this. They will say, oh, these words don't even have a meaning. They start off by saying you have to take the literal meaning. And if you back them into a corner and get them to admit that the literal meaning does not befit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the sensible one, once they realize that, he will say, okay, well, then it's not the literal meaning. He will make a ta'wil. Okay? But they say making ta'wil is not permissible. So now they're caught in a catch-22. If they insist on the literal meaning, then they know that's blasphemy, or at least, they should know it's blasphemy. I'm not certain they all do. But if you don't take the apparent meaning, then that's ta'wil, which they also say is forbidden. So this person he's going to do something haram in either case. So what do they sometimes do to try to break out of this catch-22? They say those words don't even have meanings. Okay, they're saying there is no actual literal meaning. They say these words don't have any meaning at all. But of course, that's not actually an escape for them, because that's also like ridiculous. Okay, that's also a crazy thing to say, that these words have no meaning at all. He says, and if the opponent says these apparent meanings are meaningless in themselves, then that is judging them as nullified, and means that there is no benefit in them being conveyed to us, and that they are worthless, and this is impossible. You see, if they claim that these attributes that are mentioned in our religious texts, in the Quran and the Sunnah, if they claim that these words don't even have a meaning, then that means there's nothing to understand What they're ultimately saying, if they say that, they're saying that the Quran is gibberish. It's just sounds that we say that have no meaning at all. It'd be like, how like some people, if they want to, imitate the sound of some other language, they just say a bunch of sounds. Like if they want to sound like they speak Spanish, they just say like, just make a bunch of Spanish sounds. So it sounds kind of like Spanish, but it's not saying anything. If they say that these words in the Quran have no meaning at all, then they're saying it's gibberish. It's just sounds without meaning. Okay, and this is impossible. It's impossible. Because if you say the Quran has no meaning, then you're saying there was no point in revealing it to us. You're saying there was no benefit in it. And how can a Muslim believe such a thing? Okay, we know that there is incredible mercy and incredible blessings in the revelation of the Quran to our loved ones, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's benefit for the dunya as well as the hereafter. But if we accept from them that these words have no meaning at all, then it's as if we're accepting that the Quran itself was worthless. You see the extent that they'll go? The extent they'll go to just to not admit that they're wrong. Everything they say, we point out how that's wrong. We point out how that's wrong, and so they just come into another thing. They're never standing firm on anything that they say. On the one hand, they say you got to take it literally. On the other hand, you say, but without similarity to the creation, which contradicts. Or you say that the literal meaning doesn't even exist, that there is no meaning literally. They just jump from one thing to another. All the while, all they're really trying to do is just not admit that we, the Sunnis, are correct. Okay, we, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, what we say is what's correct. It's clearly tied to the book and to the hadith, and it makes sense rationally, which is not something that they can say. They can claim that their teachings are tied to the book and to the hadith. They can make that claim. But it's very obvious that what they're saying doesn't make any sense. So they must have misunderstood the book because the book makes sense. Let's keep going. It says, in the language of the Arabs, so he's going to start talking about Arabic language now. He says, in the language of the Arabs is whatever you want of figurative usage and vastness of meaning in a dress. And they used to know the different contexts of the speech, and they understood the implications. Okay, so what Imam al-Qushayri is saying here is that the Arabic language is a vast language. Okay, it's not some kind of robotic language where every word has exactly one meaning. Where A always equals A. No. Okay, the Arabic language is a language that is vast and it's beautiful. And it has eloquence and rhetoric in it. Sometimes you say a word and it means one thing, and sometimes you say that same word and it means something else. The word Asad in Arabic, Asad, it means lion, that big cat that they have over in Africa. That's what the word literally means. It means lion. But sometimes you might say about a person, oh, that person is a lion. Haven't we heard of people in the past? Oh, he's the lion of Libya. Why would you call a human being a lion if the human being is not a cat? Well, that's called eloquence. It's a metaphor, which is a form of eloquence. It's a form of figurative speech. We're saying that human being is like a lion, not because he walks on four legs. No. Because a lion is known for its courage, for its bravery. And that human being became known for his courage and his bravery. So we say that person is a lion. Okay? Arabic is like that. Not every word that's used in the language is literal. It has non-literal meanings. What do we say about the ayah in Surah Al-Kahf that says, Jidari yuridu an yanqad? Okay, if you take it literally, it would mean that the wall wanted to topple. that the wall wanted to topple. If you take it literally, it means that this wall had a will of its own and that it desired to fall. But we know that's not the case. In reality, it just meant that the wall was leaning. Okay, and soon it was going to fall down. You understand? Arabic is not a literal language. There are times when you take things literally, times when you don't take things literally. And the Arabs of that time, the Arabs who lived at the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they spoke that classical Arabic language as their first language, the mother tongue that they learned from hearing their parents and their neighbors speak. They acquired this tongue and they understood how to use it. So when they heard these ayahs, they did not take these things literally. They knew what they meant. They understood the context and the usage, and they understood the implications that a literal meaning would have, and they knew to reject those implications because it was their language. Just like those of us who grew up in America speaking English, we hear things and we know not to take it literally. If someone comes to me and say, yeah, man, I escaped by the skin of my teeth, I know not to open his mouth and examine his teeth to see if he has skin on his teeth. Okay, he doesn't claim to actually have skin on his teeth. If someone says cut the light out, I'm not going to go get a pair of scissors and then try to cut the light bulb off of the light. When you speak a language, you understand the meanings of the words and the phrases. You don't take everything literally. Part of the reason why these likeners have gained the numbers that they have, part of the reason why they're spreading a little bit these days is because the people of today have become very weak in knowledge of classical Arabic. When they learn classical Arabic, they learn it from a book. They look in the book, they see an Arabic word, they see, that it means this or this, like one or two definitions written in their little glossary. And for the rest of their life, they think of it has like a one-on-one, like one-to-one relationship. Whenever you see this Arabic word, it means that word. But no, the Arabs who actually spoke the language, they didn't learn that language by studying, glossaries or small dictionaries. They learned the language by hearing how people use it. And they knew that those words have many different meanings. They understood that. And I wish the people of today would understand that. MashaAllah. Let's go back to what Imam al-Qushayri said. He said, they used to know the different contexts of the speech and they understood the implications. So whoever backed away from ta'wil, that is, due to his puny understanding of Arabic, and he's saying whoever backed away from ta'wil, whoever claimed that ta'wil is something we don't do, Imam al-Qushayri is saying he only made that claim because his understanding of Arabic is puny. Okay, this guy does not understand the Arabic language because the Arabic language is extremely figurative. You see non-literal understandings, non-literal usages all the time. Okay. MashaAllah. I'm going to take a quick, before we get into this next little part, I'm going to make a quick statement. Going back to the definition of ta'wil. We said the definition of ta'wil is to not take the literal meaning. Okay? When we say you're not taking the literal meaning, there's two ways to do that. Okay? One way to do that is for a person to reject the apparent meaning, the literal meaning, okay, but still believe in his heart that these words have a meaning and that whatever the meaning is, it befits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this person is safe. Okay, this person is safe. He rejects the literal meaning and he knows they have a meaning that befits Allah. That one is safe. If, on the other hand, he decided to reject the literal meaning and actually suggest a specific meaning for that word to have, a meaning that befits Allah, that person is also safe. So there's two ways to make ta'wil. The first way, a lot of people nowadays, they're referring to it as tafweed. They're calling it tafweed these days. But really, even the first way is ta'wil, because you're rejecting the literal meaning. Okay, it's what we call a general ta'wil or a vague ta'wil. You're rejecting the literal meaning, but you're not giving it a specific meaning. That's ta'wil ijmali, okay, vague ta'wil. And people nowadays are calling it tafweed. And then the second path is to do ta'wil tafsili, which is a detailed, specific ta'wil. That's when you reject the literal meaning, but then you offer a specific meaning for the word. Even though you know, like, there's a chance that you're wrong about the specific meaning, okay, but at least the specific meaning you offered is one that's consistent with the rest of the deen, okay? It doesn't contradict anything in the deen, and the meaning befits Allah, okay? Both of these pathways are safe. Both of these paths were walked by the people of the Salaf. Both of these paths are walked by the people who came after the Salaf. The difference is that path number one, the path of the vague ta'wil, where you don't give a specific meaning, that was the majority during the time of the Salaf, and it's the minority among those who came after the Salaf. Whereas the second path of offering a specific meaning, that was the minority in the time of the Salaf, and it's the majority after the time of the Salaf. But both of those paths were walked by the people of the Salaf. Both of those paths were walked by the people of the Khalaf, the ones who came after them. Okay, so which path is the path that leads to destruction? It's accepting the literal meaning. That's the one that leads to destruction. The two safe paths start by rejecting the literal meaning, and then it's a case of, do you offer a specific meaning, or do you just say, it has a meaning that befits Allah, and I believe it, without offering anything specific? This is the way of the Sunnis. This is the way of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the way of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. And this is why Imam al-Qushayri is saying, whoever refuses ta'wil, meaning refuses both of those paths, this person, he does not understand Arabic. Okay, because ta'wil is something we must do. Then he says, and for whoever comprehends different features of the Arabic language, realizing the true meanings is easy. Aha. So here, he's going to start going into that second path. The ones who actually have enough understanding of Arabic language and enough understanding of the deen that they can look at some of these mutashabihat ayahs and they will realize what the intended meaning is, or at least, you know, with a high probability. Again, they could be mistaken, but they will at least know a meaning that befits Allah and is consistent with the rest of the deen that they could insert there. Meaning, if you have enough knowledge, you can be among those who does the second path, who offers a specific meaning. Okay, and Imam al-Qushayri says what? It's easy. He says, for the one who really has that level of knowledge, this is an easy thing. He goes, it was said, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, which means no one knows its ta'wil except Allah and those who are deeply rooted in the knowledge. We mentioned this earlier in the chapter, that one of the ways to read this ayah, instead of pausing at the word Allah, you pause at the word al-ilm, which means no one knows the ta'wil of these mutashabihat ayahs except for Allah and those who are firmly rooted in knowledge. Okay, with this reading, it's very clear that if a person is firmly rooted in knowledge, he will know the ta'wil of these ayahs. Which ayahs? The ones for whom, you know, arriving at this ta'wil does not require knowledge of the unseen. He said, it is as if he said, meaning it's as if Allah said, Those who are deeply rooted in the knowledge also know it, and they say, we believe in it. Okay, so here Imam al-Qushayri is pointing to this ayah and the way of reciting it such that you stop at the word al-ilm. He's saying this ayah, it's as if it's very clearly saying that Allah knows the ta'wil, and those firmly rooted in knowledge also know the ta'wil. And I want to call your attention to what it says after that. They not only know the ta'wil, but then they say what? We believe in it. They know the ta'wil and they believe in it. So here he says, continuing, belief in something is only conceived after knowledge. Okay, he's saying in order to believe something, you have to know what it is you're believing. It says, as for that which is unknown, believing in it is unachievable. He's saying if there's something that you don't know, it's impossible to believe in it. And I want to just add a little point here to make this a bit more clear. When we say it's impossible to believe in something unknown, we mean if something is like completely unknown. If it's unknown in all of its aspects, well, then it's impossible to believe in it. But it is possible to believe in something that's known by only some aspects and unknown by the other aspects. It's still possible to believe in such a thing because the aspects that you know are enough to make belief possible. For example, going back to those two paths we were talking about, the first path, which is the path of those who reject the literal meaning, but they don't give a specific meaning to it. Okay, these people, in a sense, it's like they're saying, we don't know what the meaning of this word is. Okay, so how can they believe it if they don't know what the meaning of the word is? Well, for them, it's valid to believe in that word despite not knowing the meaning because they know it's not the literal meaning. Okay, they have like some knowledge about it, just not a lot of knowledge, but they have enough knowledge that they know something about it. And knowing something about it is enough to make belief possible. When we say that it is impossible to believe in the unknown, we're talking about something that's completely unknown. He says, because of this, Ibn Abbas said, I am among the deeply rooted in the knowledge. Ibn Abbas, may Allah have mercy on him and his father. Ibn Abbas, he said straight up, he says, I'm one of those firmly rooted in knowledge. You know, what he means by that is he's one of the ones who knows the ta'wil of the book and believes in it. You know, which is especially obvious because our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for Ibn Abbas. He said, oh Allah, teach him the ta'wil of the book. So if it were impossible for the humans to know the ta'wil of the book, how could the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam make dua for Allah to teach the ta'wil to Ibn Abbas? Radiyallahu anhuma. Okay, so clearly it's possible for the humans to know the ta'wil because the prophets would not ask Allah for something that's impossible. And of course, the dua of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was granted. Ibn Abbas became among those who knew the ta'wil of the book. And this is why he said, I'm among those who are deeply rooted in knowledge. Meaning he knows the ta'wil and he believes in it. Radiyallahu anhu. It says, this is the end of the quote of Hafiz al-Zabidi concerning what he conveyed from Abu Nasr al-Qushayri. May Allah have mercy upon him. So now, after 2 full classes, we finally reached the end of the quotation. Imam al-Zabidi quoted a long excerpt from Imam al-Qushayri's Risala. And now we finally reach the end of what Imam al-Qushayri said. And it's a very strong refutation of these likeners. He went point by point, all the things that they say, and refuted all of them. Okay, so it should be very obvious to anyone at this point that these people who say to take these ayahs to take these words literally, that these people are very misguided, and that their actual goal is to try to get into your heart a belief that Allah is a body and similar to the creation. Okay, and as people who hate idol worship, we will never go down that path. We will never go down the path of believing that Allah is a body, something that has a shape and a size, okay, something that has length, width, depth, volume, perimeter, surface area, something that's in a place, something that moves, something that's connected or distant. No, we're never going to accept these things. Okay? All of those things, those are attributes of the creations. Those things are attributes of what? Bodies. You look around the world, when you look at the bodies, you find that they have length, width, and depth. They have perimeter and surface area and volume. They have shape. They occupy space. They're located in a place relative to other things that are also in places. They can move or be still. They can be touching another body or separated from another body. They can be inside something or outside of something. All of these terms are terms that apply only to bodies. They apply only to bodies. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a body. I'm going to end the class in a minute, but I say this all the time, and I hope it's setting in. But the ayah that needs to be your guide on this issue is the ayah laysa kamithlihi shay. Okay, this ayah, it means there is not a thing with any similarity of any kind to him, meaning to Allah. Okay, if you keep this ayah close to your heart, you will not go astray on these issues. You will never be someone who likens Allah to the creation. I ask Allah to make me and to make you among those who continue to believe in Tanzih, who continue to clear Allah of resemblance to the creation. And I ask Allah to help us and cause us to die upon the correct Aqidah. And I ask that Allah not put our trials and tribulations in our belief. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We'll pick up next week, inshallah, where we left off here. If there are any questions, please ask it now, and I will respond if I can. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to all those who salamed me in the chat. Okay, well, since there don't seem to be questions, let's say La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. بارك الله فيكم. I'll see you all next week, same time, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.